So good afternoon. I have to say it's a massive relief when you come in here. It's completely empty, and you think, I hope somebody turns up because the time it takes to do a presentation, and then you think, is it going to be of any value? So that's the bit I'm still worried about, right? So I won't know that till the end. So I'll leave that up to you to decide. Thank you very much. I think my goal is really try and give you a different perspective on the value of AI. I think I always find these things interesting. I've been to Big Data London for 10 years, and this is the first time I've spoken at quite a few. It's the first time that I've exhibited. Oh my God, we were on a stand, and people coming asking questions. There were tire kickers, people stealing sweets. They're not stealing them, by the way, we're giving them away. But it's like the people do that and everything. I've seen it all. It's been really interesting. And presenting is a different perspective as well, which I've done a lot of. And so my goal here is to try and give you some value. So let's see how we get on. I'll do a vote at the end. We'll see how we get on. I hate talking about me, but I guess nobody's heard of Valster. It's pretty new. I guess my story is really simply, I started off doing data. I first did AI in, you don't need to duck, by the way, stand up, it's fine. Welcome. So started doing AI a long time ago for Citi. Citi, a big American bank, wanted to come to the UK, and they did not want to employ lots of people. They wanted to compete with all the UK banks, and they said, we're going to use AI to do it. At the time, AI was only in universities. And so we worked with Heriot-Watt University, who had a department of super geeks wearing sandals with a supercomputer. Yeah, I did start off with punch cards, by the way, in case anyone's going to ask that question. And so, yeah, we started off using some AI to do our risk management and things like that, and trying to automate mortgage underwriting a long time ago. So I think AI has been around for a long time. I think it's more pervasive now, more people are using it. So my take on this is, how do you get the value? You'll see lots of people here exhibiting some great products and things. I guess I would always ask the question, why? So if you hold that one word in your mind, and we'll come back to the why. So my background, I started off in technology, and I always kind of wanted to be customer facing. And so I started doing analytics. I got a kicking for giving people data for fund managers when I was working for investment bank. It wasn't good enough quality. They were trying to make investment decisions, and it was really difficult getting that data. So I've been through those experiences of getting it wrong. I felt like other people knew what they were talking about, but then kind of decided they didn't really know any more than me. So I wrote a book because I just felt inadequate. And if you've ever had that feeling and feel like you've got to put yourself out there. And so when I started writing it, I realized there's a lot I didn't know, as well as there's probably a lot I did know. And then I thought nobody would buy it. And so it got past that, someone bought it. And now it's sold out. The first book sold out. People are using it to run their businesses and kind of using it as a bit of a thing in what we're doing. I have a bit of a thing about consultancy as well. I think consultancy needs to be ethical. I think AI is chipping away at the heels of consultancy, but I think AI needs to add value. So I'll come back to that again in a minute. So a little bit of the background. So we're now developing software to do some of these things. And so I get involved with data analytics and AI for lots of firms. And I think that's my background and experience. And I guess the key takeaways are, so understand that value can be delivered through AI. I always think there's kind of two sides. There's the risk, there's the ethics, and should we not? And if you listen to everything that's on LinkedIn, everything that's in the press, people will either say they're really worried about it, or they think it's going to be the next thing that's going to drive more growth and GDP. So there needs to be nothing in between. And I'm going to say to you, I think there is a business case in between, which is a balanced perspective. I think there are challenges of using AI today, so we'll talk about some of those. But I really want to kind of give you some frameworks just to align AI to your business goals and show you how you can do that. So moving away from reactive, I think most people who do data analytics and AI, and I've been guilty of this, you have stakeholders who ask you to do something. Chief executive says, we need to do AI now. And you go away and you think you've got to do it. There may be a project that someone comes up with. I think that's a disaster. It's a disaster waiting to happen. And the reason I say that is because if a project comes along or you need to use AI, it doesn't mean that's wrong, but it means you need to go, why, right? So back to that question, why are we doing the project? So unless you know the goals of the organization, unless you know why you're doing it, you should do nothing. You add more value by doing nothing than doing something that will cost money and everything else. So we all know these reports of, how many projects fail. I don't think I believe all the numbers because I don't think it's quite a homogenous market, but I think a lot of projects do fail because they're the wrong projects. Good research by MIT, Harvard, and everything else. So I want to kind of get you to the point where we break through the hype and into the reality of what you can do to make sure you're more successful with those projects. So bear in mind the why bit, but also why you would never start with a project ever. Okay, I promise you that's the worst thing you can ever do. Okay, don't start with a project. And if someone says we need to use AI, you need to ask the question why, and we'll come on to that. So this is just a little bit, I mean, you'd have seen all these things, okay? So Gartner, they said, well, using AI, people can lower their costs. So this is why we want to use it, right? All of these things. So these are the general sort of industry studies that say, therefore, people should develop more products, come to Big Data London with more products, and some of those companies have been around for a long time. Some of them will survive a year, who knows? But at the moment, we're in a bit of a bubble, and that's fine. And then talking about those exposed to AI, I don't know what exposed to AI means, but anyway, so saw higher growth, and that's fine. And then data-driven companies are more likely to be profitable. That I absolutely guarantee that's true, right? So having worked across some major transformations in Europe, generating value, I absolutely guarantee that is something you'll get. And that's more likely to be profitable. It doesn't mean you're 19 times more profitable. It means you're more likely to be profitable. And that's about moving away from heuristic decision-making into using data, doing things based on evidence, not doing things based on gut decisions. And I think no one can deny, that's a good thing, but you have to know what is it you're trying to achieve. So for me, the challenge is that most organizations have a gap between the capabilities of data and AI and what their business goals are. So you've got a business person saying, we want to grow the business. And you're going, we've got a platform, we've got these data tools, we know our stuff, we're brilliant. And how do you join that gap? Actually, you can't. And the reason you can't is because generally the goals are rubbish. Okay, I have never seen a company's goals that are good enough, ever. So if I said to you that companies will turn around and say, we're going to be the number one for this, and how do you measure that? So I don't know, so they'll say all kinds of things. They look great on their websites. They look great on their financial reports. But actually, if you turn around to 20 people in the organization, people in HR, finance, everything else, they'll all go, okay, I know how I'm going to deliver it, and they're in different ways. So one of the things I say is, do not take those things as being your standard for what you're doing. I think you should align to the goals, question the goals. And there are only about 20 goals. It's really interesting. If you break it down, there are about 20 goals that any organization can have. You go, is that really right? Well, I promise you it's right. Because if you break it down, it will be growth. It will be, how do you achieve the growth is a bit underneath it. But growth, how do you reduce your risk? How do you, I guess, kind of do lots of things like acquisition, and how do you make your customers, more satisfied with what they're doing? How do you get your employees to be more engaged? How do you be more efficient? Ultimately, there are only about 20 goals that any organization, whether they're public sector, private sector, not-for-profit, whatever, will have. And we all use different words for them. You might call it operational efficiency. Some people might say operational excellence, but it all means broadly the same things. Goals should not have numbers attached to them. If I see a firm that turns around and says, we are going to grow by 20%, honestly, that's a red flag. Because how do you know you're going to grow by 20%? You've got evidence. You need to say, we want to grow, then you need to go away and do some work to figure out how you're going to get the 20% growth. So I think it's a mistake when you're thinking about data and AI to have the wrong goals, but you need to have the right ones. So I think I would challenge you and say, get the right ones. Stakeholders will put things out there on websites, on financial reports and everything else, and they'll say they sound good to the market. It's a great ambition, and there's nothing wrong with them, but they're not what you can deliver against. So I would ask you to say, go away and figure out what the real goals are. Goals you can't deliver against. You cannot use data and AI to deliver growth. It's just too big a problem, right? I'm not saying there aren't things you can't do, but you can't say, yes, I'm going to help us grow. It's too big a thing, right? So growth you can get from, we're going to look at a greater share of customer wallet. Okay, we get what that is. We can understand that. We're going to upsell. We're going to cross-sell. We're going to acquire more customers. Now you're talking. Then you can break it down. So it's got to be more granular. When you do that, you probably end up with about 700 or 800 things that any organization can do. And then you start saying, okay, so there's a limit. There's only so many things you can do in any organization. And so when you do that, you can then align what you're doing, not to the goals, but to the levers that drive the growth. Okay, so you can absolutely know if it's customer acquisition, we know that we can look at customers. Who are our customers? Let's do some personas. Let's start looking at those things. Let's start understanding how many have we got, which regions are they in? And then you can start saying, okay, based on what we've done, we get some insights. Always start with insights, know what you've got, and then start to do some more stuff to say, we can build a churn model to identify those customers that are leaving us and figure out why they're leaving us. And then data and AI is completely useless unless you drive actions, okay? I hope you already know that. So in itself, it is pointless. But unless you use it to say, and so when people talk about dashboards, I always say dashboards, generally most people's dashboards are a 1 out of 10. And I get like, okay, 1 out of 10, that's a bit harsh. 1 out of 10 is having a dashboard. If you have a dashboard that is 10 out of 10, it is something that's driving the business, changing business direction. It is embedded in every business people, their job descriptions and everything else. If you start to do that, congratulations, you're a 10, making business decisions on the back of that. But producing a dashboard and telling me we've got lots of people using it, I promise you, you're a 1.5 out of 10. So that is not going to deliver value. Okay, same with AI. We'll come on to that in a second. So when you think about maturity of AI, I think it's important to understand, what things could you be doing, should you be doing? There's no right answer for this, but I think you've got to start off small, start off doing things that add value to your organization based on the goals, and then start growing. And so I think if you start off by, let's do completely autonomous decisions. By the way, let's stick an autonomous car in the middle of the road and see what happens. And we all know what happens. It does not go that well. Theory is good. Practice, not so good these days. So I think completely autonomous decisions, autonomous trading on the stock exchange, disaster. You only need a little bit of a downturn. The whole stock market, because it's driven by what suddenly dives down in a more exaggerated way. So complex decision making autonomously is something you might aspire to later on. And that'd be about customer pricing on your website. A customer comes to your website, does stuff. So beware of those things, but actually starting off by, simple detection using ChatGPT to say, tell me about something, but don't trust the data sources. Always check on those. Use your internal data more than external data. So I think, yes, you can do a lot with AI, but understanding how you're using it back to the goals. And most people are in that space. Very, very few people start moving into that top right corner. And I think that's the dangerous area where you need to make sure your data quality is absolutely perfect. You need to understand your business goals. Below that, you can experiment, you can play with AI and everything else. And I think people often worry about the risk of AI. My view on it is simply, if you want to identify 20 customers who might be about to leave you, there is no danger whatsoever in using AI, ever. There's nothing you can do wrong. So why not do it? Because even if you only identify 15 and you haven't got all 20, it doesn't matter, because you've identified 15 you would have done before. If you're trying to say, I am producing a report for a regulator and I am giving them this data, if it's not 100% right, don't use AI for it. Okay, so I think that gives you some boundaries. So when people talk about the risk of AI, think about the things you can do that will absolutely help. And I promise you, if you're trying to identify how could I acquire 20 more customers, there is nothing you can do wrong with AI. Okay, as long as you're not doing some dodgy algorithm or whatever. But acquiring new customers, nothing wrong with it. How you treat customers is a different thing. But so actually identify those things. Those are the things you can move forward on. You can start delivering value. But the thing is, don't treat it as being gospel, do it. And then I would always say with anything AI, there is no such a thing as waterfall, or there's no such a thing as an agile methodology ever. Okay, you need to get out that mindset. It's experimental, it's data science. Any data science experiment starts off with a hypothesis. We want to grow our business. Okay, we want to acquire more customers. How are we going to do it? We'll do something. It won't be perfect. We'll learn and grow and improve. We'll learn how we use it internally, and we'll improve our data sets. We'll bring in more data and everything else. it needs to be that mindset. And that's something you need to communicate to stakeholders and everything else to say, yeah, we can't give you. I had a CIO who said to me, I need you to tell me how many more customers we're going to get when we run this model. At which point, you get off the floor after laughing and I just can't tell you that because I don't know, because I haven't seen the data unless I examine everything and then the data quality might not be right and the governance may not be right. And he goes, well, I need to know the answer. Well, we'll do what we can. Well, no, I need to know the answer now. It's like, so you can't give them the answer. What you do is get an answer and then say, is that good? Is it making a difference? And then we start to get better. So I think understanding when you're getting value, be happy with it being good enough and then try and improve it because you learn so much in doing that. If you try to go for perfect answer, what happens is you over-engineer, you do too much, you spend a lot of time building, you're not generating value. Get to value quicker. People talk about MVPs. I'm not sure whether that's the right answer, but I think kind of early value through data, quicker, using AI to generate something and learning from it and then going forward. Don't try and be perfect with AI. I promise you, it's not perfect, will never be perfect. Getting to that top right corner is an ambition that probably isn't worth having today because I don't think AI is good enough. It will be. So I mentioned about the dashboards. This is the way I would think about AI, and forgive my sarcasm, but when I say, when people say, oh, I'm using AI and I'm not using Google queries anymore, that'll be my mother, by the way. So that's what she'll say. She'll use, ChatGPT. She thinks she's amazing. And of course, what it does, it gives you an answer. My mother, by the way, is 95, so she does use ChatGPT. And so, although I can't imagine what for, but anyway, so she does. So when you replace Google queries, and I think that's the way Google and everyone else is going, great, okay, so that's useful, but you really don't know. Google was based on adverts, was based on, that whole model is useful to find websites. But suddenly you're getting information in a different way and you're getting some value from it. But again, you need to validate it because all AI, apart from, I think, Claude and something else, are designed to give you an answer. Okay, so if I asked everyone in the room, what's the answer to this? You really should be saying, well, it could be this, I don't know, I actually don't know the answer. Anyone who says I don't know the answer, I love them. Because literally, that shows to me they've actually thought through what you're asking them rather than saying the answer, life, the universe and everything, 42. That's probably a bit, bit old for most of you, but anyway. But literally that was the whole thing about HAL being like a change on the IBM name. So in Life, the Universe and Everything, if anyone's ever come across that. So there was a computer called HAL. They asked it the question, what is the answer to Life, the Universe and Everything? It came up with the answer. It took years to do, and it finally, in fact, thousands of years, it came up with 42 as the answer. And I think that's a bit like ChatGPT. I think they were way ahead of their time when they did that. And so when you get the answer, you kind of go, what does that mean? And I think there's a little bit of that. So I think Harvard, so they have a recent report which came out which calls this work slop. And absolutely it is. People produce stuff from ChatGPT and it's complete and utter rubbish. Okay, it's the words are there, there's stuff in it, validate it, get it right. So well done, you're a 1. Okay, so that's not really very good. That's where a lot of people are. Using tools, I think using tools to capture your voice, meetings, do actions, superb, absolutely perfect. Voice assistants, chatbots, they have their place. They also have their faults as well. As we know, there have been plenty of use cases around that. Research and insight, really good, but with it, you don't get critical thinking. So you need to be critical thinking with it. So give you an answer, but always challenge AI, because it's useful to get a framework. If I asked you to write a data strategy using ChatGPT, I promise you, it's no more than a 3 or 4 out of 10. Do not use it. The only stuff that's available in the public domain is stuff that everyone's prepared to share. I promise you, anyone who owns anything important would never share it. I wouldn't. I don't know about you, but you wouldn't, would you, right? So beware of the data. So universities will share, everyone will share, but companies will not share their commercial stuff because I promise you it's confidential. So you can't get all the best insights on a company through ChatGPT. You can only, when you use your own data sets, can you do some clever stuff. So be aware and kind of use stuff, but at a high level. Guidance is great, but critical thinking is missing. Coding, creating programs, great, but by the way, you might need to modify and edit at the end. So we're adding value. Agents designed to automate, replace some business processes. Some of those have been massively successful. The danger is trying to get 7 or 8 agents all working together to do things. I promise you, that becomes quite dangerous. Because what you're doing then, people say, I've got a process and I'm going to automate my process. By the way, anyone who talks about processes, that is so 10 years ago, don't do it again. Processes do not exist in my world. So processes, it's probably my way of describing it. I think they're BS. Okay, people talk about a process. It's their way of saying, "Oh, this is what we do." You know, I do payroll. I'm going to turn around and I'm going to sort of say everyone's worthy of a 5% pay increase, and we'll do that. And it sounds great. You look at the data flows underneath, and you go, "Oh my God, they did that. They put it in a spreadsheet. They cut and paste the exchange rate off Google. I don't know which website they used, put it in there. They did that, sent it round. It wasn't password protected." That's a data flow, okay? I would suggest if you want to use AI, stop thinking about processes. Processes, no auditor, no regulator would ever trust a process. Data flow is what they're all asking for, and that's the way you should be thinking. You can convert a process into a data flow, but it is quite prescriptive about what data do you use at any one point in time. If you do that, you get more value because you can automate things. If you know, I get that field from there, I get that field from there, how do I do it? You can automate those things. You can start doing some great things. Please stop thinking about processes. They are a description to make you look good. They don't actually solve problems. Data flows are much better, more specific and relevant, and they involve specific fields and everything else, and you can start automating when you've got data flows. So yes, you can talk about processes. AI used to design products and services, great idea. I think, you know, that's kind of insight. It's telling you stuff you don't know, you know, which markets or other people are in and you're not. It just gives you ideas, which you can then take and say, oh, that's a great idea. I didn't thought of that. Or actually, it's a really bad idea, but you get to validate. And then, you know, some complex decisions, pricing might be okay. You give it some boundaries, you give it some parameters, you could do some things. Business strategy is kind of interesting as well, because you can say, other people are doing this, give me some ideas that I could do. Good, but it might not tell you the answer of what you should be doing. If you automate it, dangerous. If you're using it to create ideas, fantastic. And then running parts of business autonomously. I've got a case study at the end. I'll tell you a bit about that. When you are using AI to run some things autonomously, and I'm not saying everything, right? If you try to run a whole business, you know, if you try to be IBM using AI to run your HR department, I'll tell you about that in a minute. Generally, it's not great. So because what you don't know comes back to my idea, it's a scientific experiment. You do some stuff and you learn. If you think you can do it all up front, I promise you, you'll identify some things you hadn't thought about, and those will be the things that will come back and bite you, all right? So trying to get things autonomously will take a lot of activity, refinement, and everything else. Don't think you can do it up front. So really, I think when you get to be a 10, that's quite powerful. You know, you're actually doing some really cool stuff. That means you've got your data flows, you know what you're trying to achieve, you know, it can learn, it can improve, you know the parameters of how it's working, the boundaries. So good stuff. And that's where we want to try and get to with some things, but not everything. Goes back to the why. What are you trying to do? If you want to automate stuff, great. But if you automate things, people stop thinking about it. And if you automate part of a business and then you stop thinking about it, what happens if another competitor's doing something exciting? You know, you've got to make sure your AI is able to learn from that and to start saying, well, we should be doing this as well. We're not doing it today. So if your AI was stupid enough not to know about AI, then, you know, suddenly the market changes and you're thinking, oh, we should use AI on our products, and we're not. Okay? So be really, really careful when you go for autonomy and actually start thinking about at what point do you break out of it? At what point do you say, I need to raise this to a human to think about it? Because if you then raise it to an AI bot, good luck. So I promise you, it probably won't have the right answers. And we know there are plenty of cases where that goes wrong. So the thing I would say is that I think most organizations do 99% ad hoc work. Now, this is me being critical, so forgive me and me being a bit sarky, but I just think, so this is where you get the projects and you say, we're going to do this. Stakeholder says we should do that. Why? Okay. My view is, don't do it. And I said it before, I think you should be more strategic. And I'm not saying, you know, delay everything you do and take years to do a strategy. I'm not even saying you write a strategy document. What I'm saying is that if you want to be data and AI driven, doing lots of projects is not the answer. Okay, that is lots of projects. There's a whole paper around how lots of quick wins. We all like quick wins, right? Quick win, you can do it quickly, get some value from it. Hey, aren't I great? The downside of quick wins is everyone thinks everything's a quick win and you can do everything that way, and you go onto a difficult thing and they go, why is it taking so long? Okay, it's not a quick win, this one. So you've got to set expectations right. Lots of quick wins do not make a strategy. Okay, so it's great to have some quick wins to get trust and everything else with AI. Be careful. And the strategic approach is, this is where you go through and you say across your organization, so get out of silos, get out of departments, they're irrelevant. They're man-made constructs, person-made constructs, they're irrelevant. Who cares whether someone sits in marketing, finance, HR? I promise you, in the same way that I'll say about processes, forget about processes. If you're thinking about that, you're thinking old world stuff. If you want to think about AI, stop thinking about processes, think about data flows. Stop thinking about departments, think about your capabilities of an organization. A capability is stuff that you do. Who owns it is kind of a secondary thing, right? Because it may be AI owns it. Okay, so please stop thinking. I would challenge you, silos, politics, are one of the biggest reasons for not getting your value. Okay, that's a tough one because you may not own that opportunity. Okay, but you have to at least consider it as a risk. And I think it's the number one risk in any organization. People, they get in the way of everything. Sorry, but we do, right? We kind of, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do this. We know what it's like, right? But if you go to a department and HR say, yeah, we don't want to sort out our promotion spreadsheet, it's finance's problem, and finance say it's HR's problem, and then you're like, okay, so you're into departmental struggles. Actually, if the organization says we should do it, then you say, this is something we're going to do, which stakeholders are interested. Stakeholders come afterwards, not at the beginning. So if any stakeholder asks you to do something, for me, it's irrelevant. I don't care who they are, it's irrelevant, okay? It is, and I'm not saying that in a glib way, the answer is, you should always go, but what they're saying, does that map back to our strategic goals? So the why question, what are the goals of the organization? Okay, so if it's about growth and someone in HR says, I know we need to make sure that all the employees are happy, we're post-COVID, with people coming back to work, it's a little bit of a mess. And you're going, yeah, I know, but the business is going bust. So if we don't win more customers, we won't have any employees, then you're going to go for growth, right? So you have to understand the reason why. So if it is about growth, prioritize that. It doesn't mean you're not going to solve your HR engagement issues. They're important, but they may not be as important as making sure the business is around tomorrow. So prioritization is absolutely key. That strategic view, this is what we should be doing, is what matters. I've not mentioned much about AI yet, but I think this is the reason why in here. So in my book and everything else, I've always talked about periodic table, which is always quite scary to me. I hated chemistry. Anyone here like chemistry? Maybe someone. Yeah, okay, sorry. So the periodic table is literally, once you've decided what your goals are, and they are the columns across there, so in this case, increase revenue, decrease loss, decrease costs, and so on. So underneath that, you can literally identify a number of activities. So if it's growth, it will be customer acquisition, it will be reducing churn, it will be upsell, cross-sell. So you identify those things, produce one of those for your organization. I promise you, that as a communication tool is incredibly powerful. No organization can do more than about 100 things. You may think they can, but actually, if you think about it, if you're doing AI projects, if you did 100 AI projects in a year, you can never do it, right? So it's just, that would be one every 2 days. That's like, what the hell? So no, you couldn't do it. Well, there are 220 working days in a year. So yeah, it would be one every couple of days. Good luck, I don't think you could do it. So what you probably could do is maybe, 10 projects or something. You've got to be realistic about this. So you take your 100 things you could do, and then you go prioritize. And you need to prioritize down, not by departments and functions and stakeholders, but by business goals, which means you actually have to go back and ask the hard question of your chief exec and everything else, can you please validate these goals? Not something that's written on a website, but real goals that are tangible. So I think the periodic table, if you can produce something like this in a spreadsheet or whatever else, then it's a really powerful thing, because then you can say to stakeholders, these are the things that you want us to do. Do you agree? Because we can help you do these things. We don't know how. We can do some AI stuff and we can do some data stuff, but we'll help you. But can you just confirm? Because if you start with that point, you're in a really, really good place. And that comes back to the 99% versus the 1%. This is being strategic. Then you start prioritizing. Prioritization for me, I mean, I work with one organization. We went through, we analyzed everything they said was a project, and they were prioritizing the bottom 10% of everything they should do. Why was that? Well, because they were working with people they liked, with departments they liked. The real challenge was doing the hard stuff, and they avoided that. They said, well, if we're doing projects, we're busy. Being busy is not good enough. It's about delivering outcomes. So for me, if you're not doing the highest priorities, then you're not doing the right things. So I think ICE prioritization is a well-known standard. First one is impact, okay? So value may be revenue, or it may be customers being happy. It might be an NPS rating. It could be all kinds of things, okay? So define your own value. It's whatever the organization thinks is the most important thing. The second thing is confidence. And I think this is the second part that I would say to you, which very few people do. If I were going to work with a bank and they wanted to increase, and this is a real example, they wanted to increase their loan book, and they said to me, we're going to do that, I'd want to talk to their SMEs to see whether their SMEs knew how you could do it. Not how data and AI could do it. Did they know how to do it? And they would then say, well, it's things like, we can make sure that, those customers who are, who've got current accounts who are in these jobs, they are going to, borrow money and we're not going to have outflows of that money into mortgages. And, they would explain all those things. And I go, at that point, the SME knows how to do. They are your ideal partner. Okay, because you cannot do data and AI on your own. It has to be to a business partner. And the SMEs, generally, the people, stakeholders, SMEs, they're all the people to work with. So at that point, you start saying, okay, we've got a bit more confidence. If your stakeholder says, we want to do it, don't have a clue, I promise you, project fail. Red flag, go and find someone who really knows how to do it. Either employ someone in the business or whatever. And we all know what the stakeholders are like. Make sure you have that confidence. Because if that person says, I need you to help me, and they don't know what they're actually asking you to do properly, you're set up for a fail. And that is one of the biggest reason why projects fail. And there are many, normally because they're the wrong projects, but because the stakeholders are not the right ones. And that's a challenge if that stakeholder is quite vociferous and they turn around and say, I need you to do it. But that's why if you go back to getting the prioritization at a group level, then actually you're in a good place, because you can say, no, this has been agreed by the board. This is what we're doing. That's powerful. That's your get out of jail card for doing the shit that other people want you to do, which you really shouldn't be doing. Sorry for using my French. So because I promise you, people will get you to do it because that's their project, because you're trying to make them successful. Don't do it. It's a disaster. Ease of implementation is you assessing your capabilities, doing some heat map about how good are we at analytics, how good are we at AI, how good are we at data quality, governance, and all those sort of things. Have we got the right leadership? Have we got all those sort of things? When all of those things are in place, you can say, if they gave us the most difficult problem of all using AI, we think we could go fix it. Good, that's confident. We've got great customer quality data. Good. Okay, so your ease of implementation has everything aligned. And if you assess those, you're in a good place. So I think that gives you top right priority. Those are the things you should be doing. Thinking about all elements of your target operating model. It's not just about your people, process, technology. It's all those things combined. Your suppliers, partners, everything else. I would run through case studies, but I think we're out of time because we've got a finish sign up there. So this is available to download. I think upstairs at the far end, I think there were some things where you can go and capture, presentation, download. Please do if you want to talk about this. But really, I would just say, please focus on priorities, business outcomes, and then whatever you do. And as long as you kind of learn as you go along, you'll start adding some value. So I hope that was useful to you. But thank you very much for your time.